In this video, I'll be talking about the one-leg stand test in the context of a DUI investigation. A one-leg stand test is part of the standard battery or the standard field sobriety test that most officers will request you submit to when they suspect you of driving while impaired. The one-leg stand test is usually the third test that an officer will request you submit to. There are two different phases when it comes to the one-leg stand test. But before we get to that, we should first outline what an officer is looking for whenever he's trying to determine whether you are impaired. The standard field sobriety tests outline what they call clues. And in each test, there are different and specific clues. And in each different phase of each test, there are different and specific clues. For example, in the one-leg stand test, there are two phases. The instructional phase. The instructional phase is when the officer will give the suspect the instructions on how to perform the test. During the instructional phase of the one-leg stand test, there are no observable clues that an officer can count against someone. The second part of the test is the balance and counting stage. There are four specific clues that an officer will be looking for during the balance and counting stage. This is the part of the test in which you're actually performing the test. The first clue will be sways while balancing. The second clue is uses arms to balance. The third clue is hopping. The fourth clue is putting your foot down. Now on both stages of this test, both the instructional phase and the balance and counting stage, officers will make common mistakes. During the instructional phase, since there are no available clues to be assigned, that won't stop some officers from doing it. Some officers will make mistakes by improperly cluing you. Most common improper clues is to say that someone failed to maintain balance during the instructional phase of the test. This usually comes up when an officer is not experienced in DUI investigation, because that is not a clue at all on this test. That is a clue on another test, the walk and turn test. Another common clue that an officer will make a mistake and accidentally clue you for is starting the test too soon. Again, this comes up whenever an officer is poorly trained or does not have a lot of experience with DUI investigations, because this is not a clue at all during the instructional phase of this test. This is a clue for another test, the walk and turn test. In the second phase of the one-leg stand test, there are also common practices or common mistakes that an officer will make. The first is conducting the test in an inappropriate location. This test is designed to be performed on a flat, non-slippery, dry surface. If an officer has you take the test in any other location that is not appropriate, then the test is invalid. Another common mistake will be that the officer forgets to consider the age of the person that is taking the test. The tests are not validated for people over the age of 65. If you're over 65 years old, you will have difficulty performing these tests regardless of your level of impairment. Another thing that officers will make a common mistake with is the person's weight. The one-leg stand test is not approved for people over 50 pounds overweight. If you're over 50 pounds overweight, you will automatically have problems taking this test, regardless of your level of impairment. Another thing that officers will make common mistakes with, that's failure to consider whether the person has back, leg, or inner ear problems. Any person that has any of those problems will have difficulty performing this test. Another mistake that officers will commonly make is failure to consider the suspect's footwear. If a person has heels on over 2 inches, then they should be allowed, per the NHTSA guidelines, to remove those shoes before they take the test. Another common mistake that officers make is giving instructions during the performance of the test. Officers often forget that the S in SFSTs stands for standard. These tests are supposed to be administered standardly. All of them are supposed to be administered the same. Another common mistake that an officer will make when scoring the one-leg stand test is that the officer will forget that he has an obligation to time the test. If an officer is not keeping track of time, then he has validated his own instructions of the test and may bring the entire test into question. If there's any variation from the standard that is applied in these tests, then the tests are invalid. If an officer instructs someone during the performance of the test, they are adding an additional stimulus, which makes the test more difficult. The only time an officer is ever authorized to add an additional stimulus or give instructions during the performance of the test is if the person puts their foot down. The officer may only tell them to lift their foot. Any other instructions that an officer gives during the performance of this test could invalidate it. If you've been charged with DUI and you either submitted to or refused the one-leg stand test, you need to have a competent criminal defense lawyer look at your case and help you navigate the impact that may have on your case.